Hello, welcome to Kaijo Tutorials. I am Kaijo. Today we're going to explore creating a simple mobile inventory system. So this system will encompass using SwiftUI and Swift, and the MVVM architecture will export topics later on, such as core data to store the data locally, and we will also explore how to sync this data and send it to our API using Node.js and store it via MongoDB for cross-platform capability. So as you can see here on my screen, this will be an example of what we'll be building. So this is a dashboard screen. There's also the point of sale warehouse menu and so on to create other subsequent screens. But for this video and the next set of videos, we'll focus on creating a dashboard screen, and then we'll go into the others. As you can see at the top here, we have the summary cards. So available payouts, today's revenue, today's sessions, followers, charts showing the sales this week, sales per month, showing the different types of charts and showing how to create a midpoint, as well as labels to indicate what each column means. When you scroll down, you'll start to see the orders. So you can see the order number, the date, the tag to, from a glance, tell you as the shopkeeper or the person who's in charge of the inventory, hey, what kind of order is this? So in this case, it has perishable goods, it's a frequent customer, and it's express shipping. And you can see here examples of 3 of the orders that's inside. Also, you can see the destination as well as shipping options and the total price for that order. So this series, before I get started, this series is not for beginner programmers. This is specifically geared to be intermediate to advanced. However, there will be supplemental videos that will go over the more complex topics so that you'll have a greater understanding as to what is happening. And if you'd like the source code, it can be found inside the link description at my Patreon. Thank you. So what we're going to do now, we are going to create the project. So in my case, I'm calling it Simple Inventory System Tutorial. And remember to set your team name as well as your organization identifier. We'll be using SwiftUI, Swift. We won't be using core data at this time. I will show you how to add it manually later on, as well as we won't be doing any tests in this particular tutorial series. Then you'll now click next. Then you'll save it to the folder. So in this case, part 1, create project. So now what we're going to do, we're going to set up the basic structure. Okay, we're not going to need the canvas at this time. Okay. So what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a few folder structures. So we'll start by adding one called extensions. We'll have extensions will be where you create custom reusable controls, like for example colors and other things that we'll use throughout the application. We'll also look at creating constants. So that's where we'll put URLs and so on. So we have a central location to store off that, as well as model for the models. And then we'll have the view model. Then we will have the view. Later on we'll have like a data layer and so on, but for now, we'll also need the controller. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a constants file. So to do this, so let me first zoom in a bit more. Okay, first to do this, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go inside of constants. Let me move this to the top. Then right click, then new file, Swift file, and we're going to call this one constant. So inside here, we're going to create an enum and this enum we're going to call it server connection URLs. So this will be of type string. We're not going to use it right now, but this is where we'll be able to add specific constants that we're going to use throughout the system. So let's call this production URL. Then, excuse me, we're going to also create a next one. I'm going to call this one App Store storage names. So these will be specific variables, app storage that we'll use throughout the system that we would like to create constants. So again, this will be of type string. Then in this case, we're going to say login. So this is for later on when we decide to create a login status, and call this login status. Okay, so we'll go back to content view. So inside the content view, what we're going to look at doing, we're going to look at creating the tab view. Just so if we were to look back at the example, what we'll do, we'll have at the bottom, you'll have the dashboard, point of sale, warehouse, and menu. So we'll need to create that menu. So what we're going to do first, we're going to create an app. Then we're going to call the variables that we created. So app storage names, and we're going to see login status. Then dot, we would like the raw value. Okay, and we can call this logged in. I'm using snake case. I know that in Swift you should really be using camel case. So in our case, we're going to say that true, but once you implement the login functionality, what you'll want to do is go ahead and change this to false, and you'll set it so that if, for example, when the user is validated, then you will set it to true, that they have been validated or not. So you'll know to show specific screens when they are logged in, or if they are not, if it is false, then you'll show the login view instead of showing the home screen. So let's clear the body, and inside the body we're going to say if logged in. So if logged in, we're going to create and show the tab view, else we're going to show, so I'm just putting a note here, we're going to show the login view. I'm just going to put here for now just an empty view, but here we're in the future we're going to put a login view. And so what we're going to do now is create a tab view, so the tab menu. Then we're going to say I'm just going to create some dummy tabs. So the first one is a dashboard, and we're going to say that we want it to be navigation style, view style, and stacked. That way, if we're using a tablet, it uses a stacked view instead of a split view. What is this saying? Oh, we're missing the @ sign at the beginning of app storage. So we'll also need to specify what it shows up inside of the view at the bottom of the tab view. So we're going to say tab item. So inside tab item, it takes a view. So we're going to use a VStack, and we're going to say image. Then we're going to use the system image, and we're going to use, in this case, chart dot xy axis dot line. Then we're going to use a text of dashboard. Then we're going to give this a tag So we're going to give this a tag of 0, so a unique identifier, so 0. So the next one in the series will be 1, etc. So for the interest of time, I'm just going to copy this and paste it about 3 more times, and then I will change the values. So the tag be 1, next tag will be 2, next tag will be 3. So what we're going to do now, so the second one is going to be the point of sale, so POS, and then we're going to say POS, and for the image we're going to say $. So we're going to show a $sign with a circle around it, $sign dot circle. Okay, then we'll have warehouse. So for warehouse, so this is where we're going to store the different products within the system within warehouses, and warehouses will then have subsequent structures to store in terms of the location of the items. So for warehouse, we're going to use the image of a house, and we're going to say warehouse. Then for the final one, we're going to have menu. 1 second. 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay. For the final one, we'll have menu. So menus where we'll have screens and different functionalities that's not used frequently. For example, change password or so on. We're going to use gear. Okay. So now that we have done this, what we're going to need to do, we need to create the first set of screens. So we're going to create the dashboard screen. So I'm going to create a folder, so new folder, and I'm going to call it dashboard. And then the reason why I create a folder for dashboard, because then you're going to have sub views within the dashboard. So I'm going to create the next folder called sub views, just so that we can over time refactor the project and so that it is more maintainable. So we're going to create a new SwiftUI view called dashboard view. Dashboard, sorry, I can't spell today. Dashboard view. Copy. Great. Okay, so this will be the dashboard. Okay, so what we'll need to do before we get started, we need to go back here and replace the text with dashboard view, so that the system knows where to find dashboard. Okay, so now that we're inside of the dashboard, let's create a canvas. Okay, I'm going to minimize the size a bit. Okay, so now we have a dashboard. So what I like to do, I like to break up the structure a little bit. So what I'll start is by creating all the different, like the model and so on within the same file, and then I'll move them over to their sub files, just for the interest of time. Okay, so extension, what I like to do is create an extension to kind of break up the view a little bit, extension of dashboard. And so in here we'll have the sub components, like for example the header and other components. Okay, so what we'll need to do, okay, so let's look back at the example of what we'll be building. So we'll now be building this portion here at the top, right here. So we'll start out by creating the model, then we'll create these two cards, and if we have time we'll add the other two, or we'll do it in a subsequent video. But once you're able to create the first two, the others is just a repeat of it with minor variances. Okay. So what we'll do now, we'll first create the model. So I'm just gonna make a note of model. So what we'll call this one, we'll call it, so this is a struct, and we'll call it summary data model. You don't have to use the word model, but I like to use it to be descriptive. So what we'll say is, we'll say var. So we're going to have variables such as summary amount, summary title, summary sub headline, summary date, etc. So the first one is summary title, which will be of type string. Well, then we'll have summary sub headline, so that will be what goes at the bottom, which will also be of type string. Then we will have summary date. We could use datetime, but in our case we'll use the actual instead of datetime we will use a string. No, datetime, date, sorry. Then we will use a summary amount to create a summary amount. This one will be CG float. Let's initialize it to 0.00. Then we will have a sub headline value. So that will be at the bottom, so that what that will be, for example, 500 visitors. That's what the value of 500. So that one will be of type int. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what we'll need now, we'll need a init to initialize the values. So self dot summary title, just to set some initial values. Okay, now we're going to set an initialization with parameters. So instead of typing this over, I'm just copying this section. So what we're going to do now, we're going to create a view model. So view model. So the view model will be where the logic happens, and the dummy data that we're going to use in the interim at the beginning of the until we are actually using data from a database. So what we're going to do now, we're going to create a class and call it sales view model, and this will be a observable object, and we're going to have publisher published, and we're going to call this one, let's see, we're going to call this one available payout. So we had created the init so that we will be able to set parameters and fill them out as needed. So let's see. So the first summary is going to be available to payout. Second, the sub headline is going to be off as off string as off. Then the date, what we're going to use is a date formatter. So what we need is date, and then we're going to have, we're going to call it date format. So it doesn't currently exist, so we're going to have to create it ourselves. Okay, so to create the date format, we're going to go inside of extensions, then we'll just call this file. So we'll create a Swift file and call it date. Then we're going to create an extension of date. Then we'll call it, you can call it whatever you like. I'm calling it date format, which is of type string. And inside here, we're going to call self.formatted. Inside here, first we're going to say date time, then we're going to say year, and then we're going to specify the format of the year. So in our case, we want default digits. Then we're going to have the month, and we're going to say there are different formats that we can use. We're using wide, you can use narrow or others depending on the space that you require. Then we're going to use day. We'll use 2 digits. So I'm going to use Control A and Command A and Control I to format the screen. Okay, so when we go back, date format should appear. Okay, so we'll need summary amount. So in our case, we're going to use 28,768, and the sub headline value will be 0. Okay, so it's saying that the date format doesn't exist. Let's check it out. Oh, I made a format mistake. Okay, so date format. Okay, so now that we have this one, we're going to make some modifications. So what we'll need to do, we'll need to make some modifications to add the other two. So in the interest of time, I will copy the initializer, and then I'll make minor changes as I go along. Okay, so let's see. What that means is that we'll have to go back to the initializer. So you can have different versions of the initializer that takes, say, three parameters, 5 parameters, etc. So the next version of the initializer that we'll be taking will take the summary amount, the title, the sub headline, and change. So we won't require the date. So we'll remove the date. Oh, one mistake that I've done. So actually the initializer, the ones that have parameters inside there should actually not have a default value but actually have their names. So that's a mistake I made. Let's correct this. The default value should only be for the default initializer, which does not have any parameters. Okay, so now I'm going to create the other model. So these, if you recall, these models are what powers these cards at the top. So next one we'll do is today's revenue. So today's revenue is going to require, is going to be a value of 15.6799. But this one is also going to need a percentage change. So we're going to need to go back here and create an additional variable called percentage change. So var percent change to show if it's increase or decrease. We're going to use CG float, and we're going to set a default value so that if there's an initializer that doesn't have it in its parameter, it will work. So I'm creating a version of the initializer that also takes a percentage change. Okay, so for the title, so we'll add a percentage change soon. Okay, so for the title, we will say today's revenue. For the subheadline, we'll say orders. We'll leave the date time as is. Actually, no, we're not using date time in this instance. So no date time. Summary amount, or the stated summary amount. The subheadline amount is 234. And then the percent change, it's going to be 10, so it will be 10%. Okay, so we're going to leave these two for now. So what we're going to do, we're going to move on now to actually create the interface, what we're all here for. So what we'll do now is inside the dashboard, we're going to call the view model. So we can add it to a different file if you like. So what I'm going to do in the meantime, just to clean up the interface a bit. So what we're going to do inside of view model, let's do the model first. So inside of model, just to clean up the interface a bit, we're going to create a file. So right click, file, new file, Swift file, and we're going to call summary data model. Don't worry, if you would like the source code, it will be available in the Patreon. Depending on the level of Patreon that you have, you'll be able to access today's video, or if you're a premium member, you'll be able to access not just this, but where I am actually in the series, which is much further ahead in terms of the master version of the source code. Because what I do is that I build a prototype of it before I actually make it into a video. Okay, so we have moved the view model. Sorry, not the view model, the model. So next we're going to move the view model. So let's copy the name sales view model. Then right click on sales view model, new file, Swift file, then sales view model. We'll copy the view model. The view model is going to grow as we develop the dashboard screen. We could also have called it dashboard view model, but doesn't really matter. Okay. All right. So what we'll need to do now, we'll need to call the view model. So we'll call it as a state object. So state object var sale. Let's call it sales underscore view model. I'd like to use the VM just so it's easier to see. Then sales view model. Sales view model. Okay, so now we'll be able to access any data that is inside of the sales view model. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to create a section called, let's call it private var. We're going to call it report summary grid, report underscore summary grid. I like to use for the subview snake case. I know that it's not language appropriate, but I use the snake case so that it's easier for me to see which sections I'm working with. And some view. Okay, so I'm going to put a section for now, and what I will do now is I'll call inside of the main body, because this is a way to clean up the interface. What I'll do is create a navigation stack. Navigation stack was added to iOS 16 to replace, that will replace navigation view. Then inside of there, we're going to create a scroll view, since we want to be able to scroll. So scroll view, and we don't want to see the indicators, so show indicators dot, then we're going to say false. Then within that, we want to create a V stack, or vertical stack, and we want it to be alignment of leading, and we want a spacing of 10. So now we're going to call report summary grid. Okay, so what's going to show so what's going to happen is that when we show, so I'm going to just put a dummy value here. So inside of a grid, so I like to add a space at the bottom of the V stack, if though it may not be needed since we're using a scroll view. We will also want to add a padding to the V stack, so padding, and also would like to add a title to the top. So within the navigation stack, we're going to call navigation title, and we're going to call it dashboard. Then we want it inline. You can set it by default, it will be auto, so as you start to scroll, the dashboard will appear at the top, but I like to use inline. So navigation bar title display mode inline. By default it's auto, and what we want to do, we'll have a toolbar, but we'll add the values inside the toolbar later. So toolbar, okay. All right, so we're going to need a grid. So to create a grid, we're going to use a 2-column grid so that they go side by side. So what I'm going to do at the top, I'm going to start creating a grid. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a private var 2-column grid. You can specify the type of grid you want. We're going to use a grid item, flexible. You can use different ones that are adaptive or even fixed. Later on in the series, we'll use a fix for a section, so a combination of flexible and fixed for a very specific section when we are dealing with the order list. This should be var. So you want 2 grid items that are flexible. Okay, so what we'll do now, we'll go down inside of report, and then we're going to call lazy vgrid. So you have a lazy vgrid, but you also have lazy hgrid. Then we're going to call columns. So we're going to say columns. Then we're going to specify that we want that property that we created above, which is 2-column grid, and we want a spacing of 10. You can use any spacing you want, but I found 10 to be most appropriate. So what we'll now do is start to have sub parts. So if this is how grids work, so if we were to create multiple items inside the grid, you can see they appear beside each other. So that's what we want. So what we're going to do now, we're going to create another subview, private var, and we're going to call this one report summary card, which will be some view. And then we're going to have a VStack, and as usual, I like it. In our case, will be alignment leading. Let's add the summary card to the grid. Okay. So what we're going to need as well, we're going to need a HStack. And inside the HStack, so that is horizontal, we're going to create a vertical. So what you, for reference, we're going to have a VStack, so vertical, but there are some items that are horizontal. So inside the HStack, we're going to need a VStack. Alignment. Leading. Spacing. Just set 10. Then we're going to create a text. We're going to use a font of caption. Then we're going to use a foreground color of white. So color dot white. Then we're going to use a minimum scale factor, so that depend on the font, the dynamic type that the user uses, the text will be able to change shape, size according to that font that the user has set from their device, but you go to a minimum of 60% of the size that you set. So we're going to use minimum scale factor of 0.6, which indicates 60%. And inside of this text, we're going to call the view. We're going to call the view model. So we're going to say sales VM dot available payout, and then we want the summary title. You're not seeing it right now because we need a background color. So let's just add a background color from now. So we're going to, on the main HStack, we're going to add a padding. So we're going to add a padding of 5. Going to make that padding be right around, so 5. Then we're going to set a background color, sorry, a background. Then we're going to set the background to be a color green, so now you'll be able to see the text. Okay. Then we'll make the corner radius of 5. Then what we're going to do, we're going to add a overlay, and what that overlay will do is allow us to have a curve. So use a overlay of a rounded rectangle. You can also use clipped shape. So overlay, and we're going to say rounded rectangle. We're going to use a corner radius of, again, 5 to keep it consistent. And as you notice there, you can't see anything. That's because the stroke is too large. So then we'll say dot stroke, and we want a line width of 1. Okay. Then we'll set the color. We're going to set a border from being, so let's zoom in a bit. I'm going to set the border so that it's not, 1 second. We want to set the border so that it is not so dark. So we'll say foreground color. Then we'll say color dot secondary, which is a kind of grayish color. Then we'll set up opacity of 50%, so 0.5, so that it's very faint. Then we're going to add a shadow just to give it a little bit of depth look. So shadow, color, so color of secondary, and again opacity of 0.5, then a radius of 5, then the x coordinate of 0, the y coordinate of 5. Okay, that should do it. Okay, let's zoom out a bit. Okay, so next, now that we have the summary title, we're going to now add the amount. So inside of the VStack, we're going to say text, then we're going to call sales VM dot available payout dot summary amount. As you notice, there's a whole lot of zeros there, so we'll need a specifier, and we'll say percent 0.2f. So we're saying that we only want 2 decimal places. Then we'll say a font. We want a font of title, so we'll make it large. Then the foreground color of white. We could actually add the foreground color on the parent, so the parent VStack, and it would apply right throughout. So color.white, and we'll also want this to be bold. Okay, so let's see, what else do we have to do? So now we'll need to create the bottom half, which shows as of and the date. Okay, so below this, report as of. So what we'll do, we'll have text, then we'll say sales VM available payout summary headline, then there's a space, then we'll say sales VM dot available payout summary data. Okay, so we want a font of caption and a foreground color of white. Okay, it's looking like it's looking more like what we had anticipated. Okay, let's see. Looks good. Okay, so now we'll move on to creating the 2 days of revenue, which is very similar to the payout. So the beauty about making it as reusable as possible is that we can copy most of this and make modifications to get it to be what we're looking for. Okay, so this one we're going to call it today revenue summary card. Okay, so we'll add it to the grid. Okay, so let's start making some changes. So instead of calling the available payout, we're going to say today's revenue, and it will automatically apply the changes. But if you recall something, we have this little bubble right here. So before I do that, let me change the background color and some other things first. So instead of it being background colored out green, we'll say clear, and we'll change from white to primary before we start to continue. Okay. All right, so let's see. We're going to want to set the summary title. We would like to put it inside of its own H-stack, so we can go show action, and that should give you the option of embedding inside of H-stack. I didn't see it appear, so I'll just manually add it, H-stack, and paste it back in. So right here we're going to add a bubble. So that bubble, based on the data that's in there, will determine if it goes up or down. Okay, so inside of amount, we're going to say change this to be today's revenue. It's going to still be a title, it's primary bowl. Then below here, we're going to put the value first. So it's going to be sub headline value, and there should be today payout. So that will go at the front, the beginning. Today's, so sales view model, today's revenue. Then we're going to say, okay, headline, correct. Okay, so let's see. I think we should separate these into their own text. So because if we take a look back, you can see right here that there's a difference between the two in terms of there's a little more spacing. So we're going to separate these into two separate texts. So let's close this. So text, okay. Move the spacing, okay. So I'm going to cut, and I'm going to place this inside of a H-stack. And in this H-stack, we're going to add a spacing of 1 and paste them back in. Then we're going to apply the styling to both. As I said, you can apply it to the parent. So we're going to see font. So we're going to remove the styling here from one of them. We're going to apply it to the parent. Okay. Let's just add a bowl to revenue. To orders, I mean. Okay. Okay, so what we'll need to do now, we'll need to create what we call a trend bubble. So what we'll do, we'll create a new view. So let's scroll to the bottom. We'll add this to a separate file in a later video. So I'll call it trend bubble. So struct trend bubble view, which is a view of that view. Then it has a body, some view. Okay. So what we want to take as a parameter, we'll use a binding to bind the value. So binding var trend %, which is of type CG float. And so inside of this body, we're going to have a section. So let's call this body first. So inside here, what we're going to do is go inside, and on the bubble, we're going to call bubble view, which is going to take a trend %. So what we'll use to send for that trend %, we will call sales. So binding to sales VM dot today's revenue % change. Okay, so what we're going to do here, we are going to create a text, and we're going to give it a tag. Sorry. So we're going to have section. So we're going to have an 8 stack, and we're going to have a spacing of 1. Then inside of the 8 stack, we're going to have an image, and we're going to call system name. So what we're going to do, we're going to say if trend % is greater than 1, then what we're going to show is an arrow up, which indicates that it is going up. So arrow dot up. Else, so we're using a ternary operator, dot down if it is going down. Then we're going to have a next text, which is going to show the percentage change. So we're going to say trend %, and we're going to specify, so a specifier, and we're going to say that it has 2 decimal places. So how we do that is % 0.2f, and then we'll have the % sign at the end to indicate that. So now there's a little problem where we notice that today's revenue is stacked, but we'll need it to be spaced like this. So one way that we can do this, changing the font. So what we're going to do is on the 8 stack, we're going to put font of caption, and now it is small enough to show everything on the same line. And then what we're going to do next, we're going to set the color, the foreground color. So foreground color, color dot primary. Then we're going to use a modifier. We're going to create a modifier, and that modifier is going to change the color according to, it's going to change it to be red if it is down, green if it is up. So what we're going to do, we're going to create a, what we're going to call it is round button size style. So let's create this modifier. So we're going to call, so the modifier will want to put it inside of its own file, but for now, let's just create it here. So struct round button size style, which will be of type view modifier. Then it'll take a binding of background color of type color. So it's going to have a function, a body, which takes content and returns some view. So content is whatever generic view or container that is called in it. So we're going to say font. So we want a rounded look. So we're going to say caption. This is a way that you can create a style and reuse it right throughout. then function, then foreground color, then background color. Then what we're going to do, we're going to have a padding, and this padding is going to be vertical 2, and we're going to have a padding horizontally. So padding horizontal, and let's make this one 3. Then we'll have a background, and we're going to add in the background a capsule to give it that round capsule look. So we're going to say capsule, and we're going to give the capsule a stroke with the background color, and we're going to let it be a line width of 1. Then we're going to give the capsule a background, and the background will be using background color, and we're going to set the opacity so that it has a faded look. Opacity of 0.25. Then we'll give it a corner radius of 10. Okay, so back to trend bubble view. Round button size style, which will take color. So the color that it's going to take will be a constant, and how we're going to set the constant is by setting a ternary operator. So similar to above, we could have created a singular variable that does the comparison so that we don't have to write out everything again, but we'll just continue writing it out here. So trend %, if it is greater than 1, then we'll use a color of green, else we'll use a color of red. Okay, voila. So if you look here, we can see that there is a green because it's a 10% increase. But what if I was to go to the sales view model, and I was to change that to be a negative % change? I go back, let's see what will show up. It's now negative, and now it's showing red. Okay, so in the next section of the video series, we're going to add the today session and the followers, which will be a variation of what we just covered. Then what we'll also do is go ahead and showcase adding the charts. You can watch my previous video and you'll see how to create these charts. So if you'd like to have access to the source code, it will be in the link in the description to my Patreon. With the base for membership, you'll be able to access everything up to what I just showed. But if you want to access everything that I have thus far, which includes this screen here and the point of sale, as well as any additional parts that I'm working on at the time, which is 2, 3, or 4 videos ahead, then you can use the Premier membership and you will have access to all of that. Thanks for your support. Please like and subscribe for the next video and hit the notification bell. Thank you for watching. Bye.